Everybody, let's get into it. Get stoned, get it started, get it started, get it started. Let's get it started. Let's get it started.
All right, we are going to start the broadcast. So, welcome. My name is Dr. Joe McCullough. I'm the physics program chair at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz, California, and I am on a one-year mission to share daily doses of dopamine through education, entertainment, and inspiration. Today, all about education. Topic for today is brain rules for students and educators, how you can learn how to learn or teach more effectively. So right off the bat, let me just give you a quick preview of what this series is going to be about. So I am going to focus on a book called Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. Again, the book is called Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. Outstanding book. I highly recommend it. I think it's a phenomenal book. And this book has 12 brain rules. He goes through what we know about the brain and then how you can apply that to learn information more effectively. And what I'm going to do is over the course of the next week, we'll touch on all 12 brain rules. Let me say a quick hello as people are doing this. iWalker Art, thank you for sharing on Facebook. Hey, Lisa, welcome for joining. Run99, welcome. So again, the topic for today is brain rules for students and educators, how to learn and teach more effectively. And I'm basing it on the book, Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. This is going to be probably a 4-part series. He has 12 brain rules. I'm going to go through all 12 and then give you my thoughts on how students can use them and teachers also. I love the house tonight, Joe. Oh, why, thank you. And that would be Chris. Neurome D44, thank you. Okay, so let's jump right into it today. I'm going to cover the first 3 brain rules, and then over the course of the next week, hey, fine woman, welcome. I have been checking out your scopes. I love them. Anybody who's into physics, check her out. Oh, sorry, you meant the hat. I was wondering what you meant, Chris. Yes, kind of having a bad hat day, bad hair day, so I thought I'd wear a hat. Okay, so these are brain rules based upon the book Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. I'm going to go through the first 3 today and give you some thoughts as how you can use them as students and or educators. So the very first brain rule is exercise boosts, sorry, it's late here. Exercise boosts brain power. Now, there have been numerous studies showing the link between exercise and increase in cognitive abilities. Pretty much anything that's important for a student, things like logical reasoning, long-term memories, cognitive abilities, fluid thinking, has shown to be increased through exercise. And ideally, what you want is aerobic exercise. So the best case scenario, 30 minutes of aerobic exercise 2 to 3 times a week has been shown to show dramatic increases in both cognitive abilities, long-term memory storage, and fluid tasks. So as a student, how can you incorporate this? Exercise. 30 minutes, at least 2 or 3 times a day. Over the course of several months, you should see all sorts of logical reasoning, long-term memory, cognitive abilities increasing. Exercise is great for everything. You are so right. In fact, exercise is now being prescribed to treat depression. Exercise is one of those things that just helps everything. Obviously, there's physical benefits, but what we're now showing is there's tremendous mental benefits. And one of the key factors to how well you're going to live the later years of your life is the presence or absence of a sedentary lifestyle. If you are active in your older age, your chances of dementia, things like Alzheimer's, are cut in half. Now, as a teacher, what can you do? Now, this is kind of tough because as a school system in the United States, once things start getting tough financially, one of the first things they cut are physical education, recess, and things like that. And it's a shame because those things have tremendous mental benefit. In fact, there's some studies showing that you could actually cut out some of the more academic subjects, spend more time on physical exercise, and still show benefits in long-term reasoning, mathematical skills, any kind of test you give. Now, as a teacher, such a broken system, and that's after making kids learn by sitting all day. Yeah, I don't want to get started on our educational system. I love the United States, but I have to say we could be doing things much better. I'm trying to change it from the inside. So as a teacher, what can you do? You can be cognizant of the fact that I can't read all the comments and talk at the same time. Let me quickly, I have a mass on my corpus, doing surgery, getting larger, also have lesions on my brain. I will have to contact you personally and touch on that later. Let me just stick to the focus at hand today, the topic at hand, Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. First one is exercise boosts brain power. Now, as a student, think about getting 20 or 30 minutes of exercise 2 to 3 times a week, and you want it to be aerobic exercise. Oh, you're very welcome. Feel free to contact me by email. I'll give you that at the end. Now, as a teacher, what can you do? There's not a whole lot in terms of making sure your students get exercise, but what I think about as a teacher is actually watching my students' state, and if I see students being tired and things like that, I'll often put on an upbeat song, have them stand up for 30 seconds and just move their bodies. And it's a great little thing. It breaks up the class. If I have teach for 90 minutes, I may have them stand up once or twice. So as a student, think about 30 minutes of aerobic exercise 2 to 3 times a week. As a teacher, think about getting your students actively involved anytime you can. Now, I teach physics, college physics, so this is not always easy, but oftentimes I'll have them stand up and do a review, 35, 40-second review with a neighbor. Just standing up for that short period of time can actually start to refresh the brain. Okay, brain rule number 2 is the human mind evolved too. The human mind has evolved over the years, just like we've evolved from apes. Our bodies have evolved, so has the human mind. Now, there's different models of the brain. A very simple one is called the triune brain model, and that's where we have 3 brains in one. The first one is called our lizard brain. It's our brain stem, and that kind of controls all of the things that we don't think about, heartbeat and breathing, and it's also where our freeze, fight, or flight response kicks in. Second part of the brain is the limbic system, also called the mammalian brain. It's the part of the brain that we have in common with mammals. And then the final part of the brain to evolve is called the neocortex, also known as the human brain. Now, if you simple brain model is if you take your hand, close it, your wrist is kind of like your brain stem represents your lizard brain, your thumb represents your mammalian brain, and your fingers represents the neocortex or the human brain. Now, the thing about the lizard brain, and this is the part I want to talk about for students and for teachers, there's an inverse relationship between activity in the prefrontal cortex, the neocortex, and activity in our amygdala, which also corresponds to activating the lizard brain. What this means is the more negative emotions we feel, the less learning there is. The more positive emotions we feel, the more learning there is. So what we can actually see is you can watch people thinking, and as soon as they get stressed, literally their prefrontal cortex will shut down. Our brain cannot think when it's stressed. And one of the things I teach teachers is our freeze, fight, or flight response is a very fast response. Now, I know that's not quite the right word, but FAST is an acronym that stands for fear, anxiety. Would you mind tweeting a link to that citation to Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina? If that's what you're talking about, I will definitely do that. If not, I'll have to catch that at the end. Lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Oh, yes. What do you think about teaching with music? Kids memorize songs fast if you get them together. I have already done a scope about this. Music is one of the best things you can do as a teacher, and in fact, I'm going to get to that in 1 second. So the human brain evolved too. What I was touching on was that anytime we feel emotions such as fear, anxiety, stress, or threat, our higher order thinking skills literally shut down. We go into a freeze, fight, or flight response, and higher order thinking, any kind of logical thinking, learning is severely impaired. So as a student, what you want to be thinking about is tying positive emotions to learning. Anytime you are loving what you're learning, enjoying what you're doing, how much you take in, how much you retain is going to be dramatically increased. Maybe it's in the book. Yes, it is in the book. All citations are in the book. I actually don't have the book to show because I bought it on Kindle so that I could easily take notes and highlight things. But one of the best books I've read it several times. He also has a great book called Brain Rules for Baby that my wife and I read and studied before we had our daughter. Awesome information. Okay, you are so welcome. So as a teacher, how can you make sure that your students feel safe so that learning is maximized? I call it home court advantage. And actually, I got this from quantum learning. It's deliberately creating home court advantage. So as soon as your students walk into your classroom, they feel safe. They feel this sense of I belong here. Bullshit. Okay, I won't even touch on that. In fact, should I block you? No, I'll let you stay in. Okay, so a couple of things I do. As soon as students walk in the classroom, I have upbeat contemporary rock and roll playing. I learned my students' names the very first week of school. I greet my students by name as they're coming in. I have upbeat music playing. A few other things, anytime I grade, I always grade in green ink. Seeing a bunch of red ink on a paper is very intimidating to a student. I teach college and I still give out stickers on my students' quizzes and celebrations, aka exams, when they do well. I use a clicker system in the classroom. Great thing for teachers. Let me just give you a quick little questioning strategy. Anytime you ask a question, you do not want to say something like, okay, who has a question? You ask a question like that, what a student hears is, okay, who doesn't understand the material and is willing to admit their ignorance in front of everyone? Here's a great, safe questioning strategy. First thing you want to do is model exactly what you want to see. So I'd raise my hand like this, I'd stand up and I would say, what questions can I answer? Or another way of saying this, okay, we've covered a lot of great information. What would we benefit from reviewing in more detail? Now listen to the difference between who has a question or what questions are there and what questions can I answer. When you ask it like what questions can I answer, what you're doing is you're presupposing that questions are already there and you just need to know what they are. If you ask that enough, and again, what I would do is I'd stand up, raise my hand, and I hold my hand there in front of the entire class and say, okay, we've covered a lot of great information. I have a couple minutes left to review. What questions can I answer, or what would we benefit from reviewing in more detail? Very safe questioning strategy. Students feel comfortable asking it. And again, what that does, in a sense, it lowers their amygdala, which is their emotional control center. And during the awkward silence, wait, yes, the other great thing that I teach teachers is here's what a lot of teachers do. Okay, who's got a question? No questions? Okay, we'll move on. It takes time for students to process the information. So when I teach teachers, what I tell them to do is actually count to 5 out loud. So I'd have them stand up. What questions can I answer? 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. That's how long you should stay there with your hand raised, waiting for students to ask a question. And if I know there's questions out there and students are still not asking them, I will say, look, I will sit here for the next 2 minutes until somebody asks me a question. And I'll say it in a more playful way, but you want to get students used to asking questions. Okay, I feel like I got off track there. So quick review, I'm talking about Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. He has 12 specific brain rules. I'm going to do a 4-part series on it. Today we're covering just the first 3 parts, and I'm talking about how students and educators can use this information. Very first one, exercise boosts brain power. If you're a student, think about getting aerobic exercise for at least 30 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week. Exercise has been shown to increase every possible aspect of brains that you can think about for learning. Long-term memory storage, cognitive abilities, fluid thinking, everything associated with being a student, exercise will help. As a teacher, this is more difficult to make sure your students get exercise, but 1, get exercise yourself as a teacher. It'll make sure you're more on the ball. And 2, think about getting your students moving. Oh, a dance teacher, so you totally know this. 2, what was number 2? The human brain evolved 2. We have sort of 3 brains in one. We have a lizard brain, a mammal brain, and a human brain. The part I think is important for teachers and students to know is anytime we feel fear, anxiety, stress, or threat, Our human brain, our higher order thinking skills literally shut down. We go into this instinctive freeze, fight, or flight response, and thinking is literally impossible in this state. So as a student, think about making sure you attach positive emotion to learning and not sitting down to study if you're stressed or anxious or feel any kind of negative emotions. In a later scope, I will give you a process called the alpha state process designed to get your brain in the optimal state for learning. Okay, last but not least, make me think. Yes, last but not least is every brain is wired differently. Here's a cool thing to think about. If you've learned one thing from today's scope, then the brain you're leaving the scope with today is different than the brain you started with. It's called neuroplasticity. Thank you for the hat. Yes, I'm wearing the hat because I'm having a bad hair day. Hair day. It's really late. I've been at it all day. Okay, what was I talking about? Every brain is wired differently. What we now know is that every time we learn new information, the brain is literally rewiring itself. If you were to look inside the brain, whenever you learn new information, what you have are these neurons connecting together in a way they've never been connected before. Now, they're not actually physically touching. There's a small gap called a synapse between it. But what you can really think about is anytime you learn something new, you're connecting neurons together in a way that's never been connected before. Your brain is literally constantly rewiring itself. The other big thing about this brain rule in this chapter, did you rehearse this before the scope? I did not. Obviously, I wrote out these cards, which is why I'm sort of bumbling a bit. But I've done this stuff enough that I'm trying not to make these scopes too long and practice too much. Okay, so part of the reason I'm doing this every single day is to get more comfortable in front of the camera and just being able to go off the cuff. So, back to brain rule. He's too passionate to have it been rehearsed. I love the brain. Here's a quick little just rant. Think about how much time you have spent learning different subjects, learning different classes over the course of your lifetime. If you've gone through college, the answer is you spent thousands of hours. How much time have you spent learning how you learn best? The answer for most people is not much. And part of brain rule number 3, every brain is wired differently, is that everybody learns differently. Nobody learns exactly the same way, and nobody can teach you how you personally learn best except you. And the only way to do that is to experiment with different learning strategies, different learning styles. Now, how can you do that? Quick shameless promotion. Check out my book, Accelerated Learning Techniques for Students. I go through some of that, and I will do future scopes. But as a teacher, how can you use this information? No two students learn exactly the same way. Anytime I'm presenting a lesson, I'm thinking about presenting it 2 or 3 different ways so that students who learn differently than other students can do it. And I've talked about this before. We have 3 main ways of learning information. Those are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And as a teacher, I'm constantly thinking about what is the visual component, what is the auditory component, what is the kinesthetic component. How many students do I typically teach at once? Generally, it's around 50 students. The most I have is 68. The least I have is 40. So generally about 50 students at once. And I have really great facilities for it. I have a great smart classroom. I use a lot of technology. I use a clicker system, which if anybody's a teacher and you don't know about clickers, check out iClicker. I've been using it for 13 years, not iClicker, but clicker systems. I would never go back to teaching without it. Right versus left brain processes. At some point I might talk about this, but there's not a lot of evidence now where you can say somebody's right-brained or left-brained. Everybody has logical aspects to it. Everybody has artistic aspects. And I would not classify people as being right-brained or left-brained. That's all I'll say about that for now. Okay, so real quick recap of today's scope. I've always been a clicker hater, but happy to be convinced otherwise. Oh, you've got to check out my classroom. It depends on how they are used. Real quick, clicker is a remote control student response system. What I do as a teacher is I try and teach in 15 or 20 minute blocks. At the end of each block, I'll put up a question on the overhead projector. I give students 2 to 3 minutes to talk about it in groups of 2 or 3, and then they punch in their answers using a remote control clicker system. Do we use very little of our brain? That whole thing about using 10% of our brain, complete BS. We use all of our brain. It's just not all of our brain is active at any one time. But it's not like if I could use 100% of my brain, I'd have superpowers. Everybody uses all of their brain, just not all at once. Okay, quick little recap. We're talking about Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. 12 brain rules that you can use as either a student or educator to learn faster or teach more effectively. Very first brain rule I went through was exercise boosts. I cannot say that word today. Exercise boosts brain power. As a student, think about getting aerobic exercise, ideally 30 minutes at a time, 2 to 3 times a week. As a teacher, think about getting your students up and moving. I generally teach 80 minutes at a time. I try to make sure I have my students stand up at least once, and you can make it fun. One of the things I'm going to introduce next week is the song, Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Anytime I play that song, it's going to be the 7th inning stretch. My students are going to stand up and do a little stretch. 2, the human brain evolved to. Big thing about this is when our brainstem takes over, when our lizard brain takes over, we have very little access to our higher order thinking skills. That happens anytime we feel negative emotions, especially fear, anxiety, stress, or threat. So as a student, think about never studying anytime that you feel negative emotions. Your time is better well spent getting in a relaxed state and then studying. Also try and tie positive emotions to learning. As a teacher, I'm constantly thinking about making sure my students are in the optimal state for learning. I try to purposefully create a joyful environment where students are excited to come into the classroom. I use music, I use magic tricks, I use physics demonstrations, I use a lot of props. Anytime I can make learning joyful, it's going to stick long term. Germany, to you, Joe, and all viewers, hello from Germany, welcome. And then brain rule number 3, every brain is wired differently. As a student, think about learning how you learn best. Nobody can teach you that. You have to experiment. As a teacher, try and keep in mind that no 2 students think the same way. If you're teaching the same way every single time, you're going to lose a bunch of your students. I'm always thinking about teaching using different modalities. The 3 main ways are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And I've done a scope about different teaching strategies for all 3 of those. I'll probably do a longer blog at some point in the future. I always mean for these scopes to be 5-10 minute scopes, and I always talk for a lot longer than I intend to. So before I sign out, let me just do a quick little introduction for those of you just joining. But repetition helps, as you're exhibiting now. Yes, we'll see one of the keys, one of the brain rules is repetition. As a teacher, I start off every class with a recap, but if you've watched these scopes, you'll see I recap the information a bunch of times, and every time I do, I try and explain it a little bit differently so that it gets through to some people that it may not have before. So anyway, my name is Joe McCullough. I'm the physics program chair at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz, California. And actually today is day 40. I said yesterday was day 38. I was wrong. Today is day 40 of a 1-year commitment to get on Periscope every single day and share daily doses of dopamine through education, entertainment, and inspiration. Today is about education. I shared with you the first 3 of Dr. John Medina's from his awesome book, Brain Rule. First 3 of his brain rules and how teachers and students can apply them. All right, I'm loving all the hearts and comments. I'm sorry I couldn't actually catch the comments and teach to the camera at the same time. So I'd like to pause for about 2 minutes, see if there are any questions I can answer. I will be doing this series for the next 3 or 4 days. So if you would like to catch the rest and you're not following me, touch that little person down at the bottom right and hit follow. Feel free to share. Thanks, enjoyable scope. Thank you so much, fine woman. And actually, I'm loving all the physics people here. I can't believe I didn't see them before. I caught the astrophysics talk that you shared. Awesome. So at some point, I think it'd be great to get all of us together and do like an Ask the Periscope Physicist kind of scope. All right, any questions I can answer before I take off for the evening? All right, if not, Freddie Ferret, thank you for inviting. Blab, yes, I may do a blab. I haven't experimented with this. Yeah, the science crew is growing. Great scope. Kyla, thank you so much. Dee Bailey, thank you for sharing on Twitter. Caffeine, yes, I'm caffeinated. If you can't tell, it's like 8:30 here, and I probably still have another 3 or 4 hours of work to do, and I have to teach at 8 o'clock in the morning. Woohoo! Okay, thank you for all of those joining me for the evening, and for those of you who are following me for the first time, this is day 40. It's going to be an awesome, awesome year. Oh, what about using caffeine? So actually, caffeine has been shown in small amounts to have beneficial results on memory and test taking. But I'm not an expert. I haven't read all of the literature, but I do know caffeine in small amounts can actually help. The brain needs sleep. That's one of the brain rules we're going to touch on. Long-term memories are consolidated and stored while we're sleeping, and the current research is showing it's in theta state. Where are a few or more studies showing learning positivity results? Oh, great. I don't have any of those studies specifically that I can refer you to right now, but I have a lot of people on here that are really smart. I feel like I'm going to have to start making sure I have resources and references to point people to. So I don't have any right now. I'll think about those on future scopes. Were there a few? Sorry, bad typing. Were there a few references? Say that one more time, please. Got a drink of water while we're waiting. I'm going to catch up soon, but if it's in terms of positivity and learning, biofeedback online app to help get brain in good learning state. Like new findings or older known stuff. I don't have anything I can quote just right offhand. And in terms of biofeedback, I had a pretty cool, what is the name of that program? There's a cool program I got. It was an actual game put out by Deepak Chopra called, I don't remember, but you wear these little things on your finger, and it measured your basically biofeedback. And in order to progress in the game, you had to get yourself in a specific mental state and lower your heartbeat. It was pretty cool. Sorry, I'll tweet it. No problem. Thank you so much. Okay, I think I'm checking out for tonight. Tomorrow, I'll probably be scoping about 5:35. Oh, it could be later. Probably going to be actually 9 or 10 o'clock. I'm teaching until late, and then I have to put my daughter to bed. So if you want to check this, check me out tomorrow about 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Have a great night, Maria. Thank you so much for all of your wonderful scopes, and I will see you all tomorrow. I'll look for Biofeedback Game by Deepak Chopra. It was a while ago. I think, I can't remember the name, and I'm teaching memory, but I haven't actually used it in like 7 or 8 years. I don't think it's on the market anymore, but check it out. Okay, thanks. I will get some sleep. Good night, all. Thank you for checking out the broadcast.